Welcome back to BetterSociety.info. This is our 15th video in our regular series, and it's the fourth and last one where we'll specifically deal with class-based societies. Now, the difference that we want to be sure to understand between the hunter-gatherer societies and the class-based societies is that the class-based societies were much more complex. In a hunter-gatherer society, in a given piece of land that a group of people were able to control, everyone wore the same clothes. They had the same designs on their weapons, the same bodily adornment. They disfigured their bodies, they got tattoos, they had all of these things in order to show that we're the people who belong to this land and its resources belong to us. And the people who would be on neighboring land would look different. I mean, they'd probably be the same racial group, but they would wear different clothing in order to specifically identify themselves that this is us, this is our land, these are our resources, and you better stay away. Now, when agriculture and animal husbandry came along, and there started to be these class-based societies, then the characteristics of the hunter-gatherer societies was transformed, so that there would be a piece of land, and a group of people were saying, okay, this is our land. I mean, you can see the map behind me right now, and it's got all these different colors. And we still have in the world this is our land, and this is not your land, and, you know, leave us alone. So that characteristic carries over. But in terms of the apparel, the bodily adornment and other characteristics within the people who live on a particular piece of land, within a class-based society, then people wore different clothes so that they could be identified as to who was, you know, the slaves, who were the slaves, who were the serfs, who were the part of the military, who were the rulers, the aristocracy, the landowners, and the monarchy. So that instead of having on one piece of land and everybody on one piece of land wore one type of clothing, you have one piece of land and there are these levels, there are these classes of people, and they wear particular clothing in order to specifically identify who goes where. And you know, most of these types of societies, there's not any change in mobility. I mean, it is a matter of birth. Whatever family you're born into, that's how you're going to live, and there's not going to be any change in where you live and what kind of a class you live in. Now, all over the world, these general characteristics come out in different ways. Like if you go to India, you have a number of different classes. But if you go to other countries, maybe they'll be characterized in different ways. The people, in addition to being on a certain class level, in terms of you're going to be a laborer all your life, there's divisions in terms of what kind of labor you're going to be doing. That if your dad he works in curing leather, that's what you're going to do. And there's no chance of you going to school. The governments don't bother sending you to school because very much, or if at all, that's because you're going to be curing leather just like your dad did, and just like your granddad did. And so there's assumptions that are built into these societies that you're going to stay in a class, you're going to stay in a particular a group, and that's where you're going to be. And the societies are complex in different ways, but the general characteristic is still there. Like in Japan, if a family, they're going to marry a kid off to another family, then there are agencies that will conduct background checks on the family. And there's a class of people in Japan who were the original inhabitants of Japan before the Japanese got there. and it's considered to be a bad thing to have your Japanese, purely racially Japanese child married to somebody who has that kind of an ancestry. And there's also an issue like in Japan where if a family had anything to do with the processing of animals, I mean in terms of slaughtering the animals, butchering them, curing the hide, making shoes, whatever, that is another group of people. And if your family is part of the shogun, the samurai type tradition, then you wouldn't want your kid to marry somebody who makes shoes, because that's something that comes traditionally down through their culture. And so it's just that's the way these cultures are. It's not a matter of, well, this is good or this is bad. It's just the as is, that the world eventually evolved into having class-based societies. And there are advantages and disadvantages to having it be that way. But of course the big advantage is that the system worked, and it continues to work in parts of the world even today. So if you're going to make the world a better place, we have to see and understand how these social systems work. And we often see that there's clashes between societies, between nations, over issues having to do with these classes. And there's other ways of these classes to be set up. So, like clans. I mean, you have some societies that there's all of these clans, and the clans go back thousands and thousands of years, and people identify with the clan. So you may have today a nation where there is a clan, where all these clans exist, and people owe their allegiance more to the clans than they owe it to the nation entity itself. When you go back to Bowen, he calls these things emotional units. I mean, people are emotionally attached to their clan more than they are to their nation. And sometimes a Western power goes into a place where these clan things exist. And because we don't understand how those things work, then we get run amok about all sorts of different problems in relationship to that. So all of this is, you can look back in history and see a lot of this. You can look in the world today and see it. It's not a matter of it not being there. It's a matter of being sure we understand how it works. So we'll continue on and talk more about classless societies next. So I'll see you later.